Will the Dallas Cowboys be all in 2023? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on
Cowboys.
Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you for tuning in. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. I am Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. He is Landon McCool. Check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, Twitter questions today. How you doing, sir?
Always excited for Twitter questions. Can't wait to see what we've got. I know that people are fully into the offseason now, getting in the draft grinding, getting in free agent questions. So I'm excited to see kind of the new era or the new realm of Twitter questions that we're going to get now.
Yeah, so we actually have a couple questions that are tied together. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. First question from Brian. He said, last year, you guys mentioned the idea of a soft reset on the pod. Yes, we did talk about that. A year on after that, where are we on that? Did it work given the cap issues? What do you think?
Well, I think the plan is still, intact as much as it could be. I think that they still plan on saving some of that money to pay some of these guys that they're going to have to pay coming up pretty soon, including Trayvon Diggs, Micah Parsons, CeeDee Lamb. Those are all the big three guys that are going to be coming up for contracts in the next 2 years. So I think that's, still on play. I think what may be, different than what we had anticipated is I don't know if they're going to be, necessarily big free agent spenders this offseason more than normal. Maybe they change their tinker with their philosophy a little bit.
I think they'll have the flexibility to do it if they want to.
Which is the difference, I think, right?
Yeah.
Between this year and last year is that I think that they'll have more flexibility depending on exactly how some things kind of work out with some of the free agent contracts that are expiring, some money that you can move around. They could definitely create a bunch of room. And they'll definitely have more room to play with than they did last year.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if that necessarily is a precursor to them spending all that cash on free agents or kind of, going in on a big trade for a big money player. I do think that it does kind of solidify that they are going to try to re-sign, which is, again, no surprise if you follow the Cowboys, that they're going to try to re-sign their own. And again, the three that we've mentioned, I don't think anybody would have a big qualm about trying to re-sign, and Parsons and Diggs and Lamb. But I do think that they've kind of given themselves enough room that if they wanted to go get an Odell Beckham Jr., like we talked about yesterday, if they wanted to, if they felt like they were a trade away for a big player, they could do that this year. Whereas last year, it felt like it really, really would have stressed the kind of cap room that they need to just operate through, within the season. So I do think that they are in a better position to do it this year, like we had anticipated. The question becomes, is there a willingness to do it?
Yeah. I mean, just to answer the question, yeah, the soft reset worked, right? Because you were able to win the same amount of games, but also save money by moving on from Lyle Collins, moving on from Amari Cooper, which we talked about yesterday. There's positives and negatives from the Amari trade. But I think the difference is like the Cowboys are in a better cap situation, but there's also more guys that performed well for them this year that they might have to retain. For example, Leighton Vander Esch, the Cowboys signed him to a 1-year, $2 million contract last offseason. He so far outplayed that contract that if you want to bring him back next year, he's going to cost more. I think Donovan Wilson had the best year of his career. If you want to bring him back, he's going to cost more. Tony Pollard, I don't think we were considering at all last year the possibility of the Cowboys placing the franchise tag on him. I remember us talking about, hey, if you want to give him $6-7 million a year, that makes sense. But like, he could legitimately earn $10-11 million a year on the open market. So yes, it worked. I just don't know how much it's going to make them super active in free agency. Now, the other question that goes with this, Landon, is there a bunch of people want to know, do you anticipate the Cowboys going all in 2023, kind of after what they did last year with their cap situation?
Well, I think part of one of the reasons they wanted to do what they did with their cap situation last year is to push money to the future to sign some of those folks that we talked about. So I don't know if it necessarily, like, I don't anticipate that what they did last year is a kind of a reshuffling of the deck to get ready to like push more chips in than they have previous. Like an all in.
Yeah.
People are using the all in phrase, and I'm using that like the kind of the Rams or the Eagles have at certain points previous, but even the Eagles, I don't feel like aren't necessarily an all in
No,
team like
I
they've been
think Jerry
called.
Jones made a big mistake by saying the Eagles were all in this year because they
Well, I
just
think people made a mistake by listening to Jerry Jones about what
well,
other teams are
because they're
doing.
not.
That's the problem.
Like,
But yes,
Philly's
I
a bad
agree.
example of being all in because they do have cap flexibility. They've got a bunch of draft picks coming up. I think if you're going to use a team like the Packers from the last 2 years, we're all in. Go look at the Bucks. Go look at the Bucks cap situation now. They're like $56 million over
I mean,
without a
the
quarterback
Saints,
on the
the
roster.
Rams,
Those
like
are all in situations.
those are teams that are constantly in all in years. And look, I mean, I think there's been teams that have had success. The Rams, won a Super Bowl with it, but like, let's not pretend like that's the only way to win the Super Bowl. I think we constantly fall into this trap, right? And even now, we're falling into the trap in putting the Eagles in that box when they're not in that box.
Yeah.
They made some aggressive moves. There's no doubt about that, but they didn't like, mortgage their future. They have a top 10 pick this year, so
Yeah.
like, and that's not even their pick. So, yeah, I think that like, if you're talking about like going all in, you're talking about mortgaging the future for now, right? You're talking about trading first round draft picks for players, for vet players. You're talking about signing big time short term contracts that maybe you're going to take some dead money hits in the few years after this. I that's to me an all in situation.
Or just doing a bunch of restructures, which is basically what Green Bay did to get in the
Yeah,
situation they're at. Like, they can't restructure any more contracts because they're already done with them.
yeah.
I see Dallas being very picky as to who they restructure.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Dallas has been clear that they're kind of in between those two philosophies, and if anything, kind of more on the side of draft and develop than the other side. But I think that maybe what this does is, after having watched these last few years, maybe it changes the angles a little bit on how aggressive they are with free agents, and maybe it changes their methodology simply because they have more money than they did last year to play around with. But I still think that the bulk of why they did what they did last year was because they felt like they could be as good a football team while doing the moves they did, and they were, and B, that they want to make sure that they can sign their own when the time
Yeah.
comes down the road.
I will say we saw a change in philosophy last year from them, or in the 2022 season, and how they build the roster, because I can't remember a time where they went out and got so many veterans to fill a role
Yeah.
starting in August. For example, Anthony Barr was a signing late August who played a massive role for them all year long. I mean, he played a ton of snaps. They traded for Jonathan Hankins. That one's not super surprising. They've done that in the past. They've
But
signed, or they
but
traded for
I'll
Michael Bennett or whatever. Go ahead.
I'll add in for the Hankins thing. Like, even that as a subcategory is something that was unique. I think that we should give the Cowboys credit, because how many years previous would they even consider signing, much less trading for a actual true nose tackle that is a big
On a
body,
1-year deal.
in the middle on a 1-year deal? They would never do that
Yeah.
before.
I mean,
When was the last time they would sign a T.Y. Hilton, a
right.
diminutive wide receiver late as a free agent? Like, they've made changes in their philosophy this
Or
last year.
or an Xavier Rhodes. Like,
Yeah,
the Rhodes one
exactly.
didn't work out as well as the other ones did, but
They tried.
historically, what have the Cowboys done? Hey, if an injury goes down, we're going to pull up a guy from our practice squad, a guy that we know, and that's who we're going to play. But they felt like, hey, we just need to try to win a couple games here. Rhodes gives us the best floor, so that's what we're going with. So they just to answer the question, I don't think they're going to be all in for 2023. I think they want to try to keep this window open as long as possible to be a contender, and just hope that 1 year things fall the right way.
Yeah, and I think the idea of all in the sense of the Rams, the Saints, That's not necessarily something that they're interested in doing as it is right now. Maybe that changes as Jerry gets
Yes.
older, but I think as it stands right now, they would rather have multiple solid windows where
Yes.
things fall right than opposed to trying to just, inch open one window, a few 2-3 inches more than a normal window would be open for them.
All right. When we come back, we're going to be talking about what type of receiver makes the most sense opposite of CD Lamb. Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn. As a small business owner or hiring manager, you know that success in 2023 all depends on the team members that you surround yourself with. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. With LinkedIn Jobs, you can hire qualified candidates more efficiently and effectively by matching open roles with people who have the skills, values, and experience to help you achieve your goals. LinkedIn Jobs helps you quickly attract qualified candidates to your open jobs with their targeting tools. They go beyond resume data by using insights from your job post, company, and their 875 million member profiles to help put your post in front of the most qualified candidates. Identify those most qualified candidates on LinkedIn Jobs and connect them fast and for free. LinkedIn Jobs helps it make it easy to screen and rate applicants based on your job qualifications, all in one platform. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs number one in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That is linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, Landon, we've got a few questions about wide receivers. Let's start with this one. A couple people wanted to know, what is the best type of receiver to pair with CD Lamb long term?
Well, I think it's more about what's going to be a good receiver to fit the kind of system that we're going to be running. Because I do think that CeeDee Lamb, he can play inside, he can play outside. You could pair CeeDee Lamb with really anybody. I mean,
And
just
that was
because,
going to be my answer. He's kind of the chess, the queen on the chessboard, right? He can do everything. So you just need to find another high end number two receiver.
yeah, and I think that that's really you probably would rather go with somebody that has some more outside skills simply
Mhm.
because you really like using CD in the slot, but he definitely can operate on the outside if you want him to. So I would say if you're trying to find like the perfect fit, maybe a guy that is kind of a slightly undersized, but still like a tough guy that has some speed that can play on the outside. That's a good slant runner. That can win on off the line of scrimmage with route running. But
It's
maybe
too
you don't.
bad like T.Y. Hilton wasn't like 10 years younger, because honestly,
Yeah,
that's a perfect
right.
fit.
Yeah, I think that that's kind of the look you're looking for. I think you've got a guy in Gallup that you can send down the field, or you hoping that he can get back to a spot where you can send him down the field. He can be the contested catch guy. I don't know that you necessarily need that guy as much as you need someone who can consistently find a way to get open, who can take advantage of the one-on-one coverage that is going to be provided to him by all the attention on CD Lamb and convert third downs, be a reliable target. You don't need him to be a superstar. You'd like for him to make a play here and there, but really just a reliable target who can convert a third down when they're double teaming your tight end and CeeDee Lamb, and you've got a one-on-one on the backside. That's the kind of receiver that really would help this offense just kind of continually be efficient in moving the chains.
No, I'm gonna suggest a name, but I think this guy's maybe slightly over the hill a little bit. But I think this type of player, I
Okay.
think like Robert Woods, like that
Yeah.
type of player
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense, right? Can block his butt off, can play. If you want CD on the outside because of a matchup, he can come and play the slot. He can play all three receiver positions. He's going to catch everything you throw to him, and he can win one-on-one matchups. Like I think that type of receiver is exactly what Dallas needs.
I keep saying Golden Tate, and the reason I keep saying Golden Tate, and I think those two are very similar players, at least in their games, right? I think the reason I bring up Tate is because I kind of want a wide receiver with an attitude. That's the one thing. I know that seems like a stupid, like ethereal thing, but I want somebody who's physical, who's like wants to get into the cornerback's face, like who wants to like rile up the offense. CeeDee Lamb is fantastic as a player, but like as far as a like rallying force, that to kind of pump up the offense. I feel like the offense is missing that. Like that Michael
They need
Irvin.
that grit toughness on the offense.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's something. I know that's not like it's an intangible, and we don't know. I especially don't normally talk about that kind of thing, but I do think that's something that this offense is lacking a little bit of. That I think that,
to be honest, I kind of think Cedric Wilson had a little bit of that last year.
sure,
A little bit of it, and they missed
I
it.
think guys like I mean, you see the Green Bay teams had tons of those guys, right? Like the McCarthy, like the Randall Cobbs, I think falls into that, right? He's a nice guy, but I also think he's tough. He'll rile up the team. He'll get after folks if things aren't going right. So I do think that someone a little spicy would be nice.
They need someone with an edge. Is really what they need.
Yeah,
And maybe it's a veteran, right? Maybe it's one of these guys that's a little bit past their prime. Like I remember when the Ravens signed Derek Mason when he was kind of, he was at the end part of his career, but he played with that edge that they needed. Then they went out and got Anquan Bolden, who had that same kind of fiery edge. Like they definitely need something like that. But I got another question regarding.
I was going to say for the Cowboys, real quick. Patrick Creighton. Remember Patrick Creighton? I know he dropped that pass, but having a guy like that on your team is valuable, who's versatile.
All right. Next question from at Jones's babysitter. He said, interested to hear more in the potential archetype change at wide receiver with the scheme change. What type of receiver do you think the Cowboys should be interested in free agency and the draft?
Well, the key thing in mind structurally that you want to remember, just kind of a 10,000-foot view of Coryell versus West Coast, is that Coryell is going to attack down the field a lot more than a West Coast offense is. West Coast offense is about timing. It's about rhythm. It's about throwing at a higher rate, almost kind of in lieu of a running game, right? Like, so there's definitely going to be lots of throws to the running back. There's definitely going to be short slants. We've talked about that. Short passes to the tight ends and receivers. So you want a guy that is a solid hands catcher, because you're going to be potentially catching the ball with some contested situations, some of these short passes. You want a guy who's a good route runner, who understands timing and pacing, who is kind of, really, if you think about, I know that Jerry Rice is, it's like, oh, you just need Jerry Rice. But the thing that made Jerry Rice so great in that system is that he was exactly where he needed to be when he was needed to be there.
And that's what I said. It's the consistency in the West Coast offense. Like, if you're going
to
to run a slant, you better run that slant exactly the same way every single time you run it.
So you're looking less for the freak athletic wide receivers that you want to try to develop, and more into the, hey, this guy is a fifth-year senior. He's run a ton of routes. He's got a very high floor. He knows how to run routes in a subtle way. He understands the assignment on the routes, and he loves to block. Like, that's the scouting report of the guy that you want, right? A route runner.
Like, just using the last year's first-round prospects. Like, I think Chris Olave makes more sense in this offense than a Treylon Burks does, who is that bigger, more physical guy. I know Olave had a better rookie season. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the guy that's just more consistent, maybe not as physically special and talented, but you just know what you're getting every single snap.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the kind of guy, honestly, if the guy in this draft class, to me, is the later, I haven't seen all the guys, but the guy that, like, to me, of the people I've seen so far, Michael Wilson from Stanford, because he hasn't run a ton of routes. He's been injured a lot, but he looks polished. He looks like he knows what he's doing. He has subtlety to his route running. And those are the kind of things that I want to see. I want to see a guy who doesn't have to be taught how to run a slant route. Like, it is ready to have a 301 class about how to run a slant route, not a 101 class when he gets into the NFL. So that's the kind of archetype I want to see at wide receiver. And at running back, I think the key thing is more of an emphasis on as a pass catcher, being able to kind of find a way to make people miss in the open space, because as many people have talked about it, we're living in a shell coverage world still. So there's going to be tons of times that you're going to be checking it down to your running back. You need the running back to be able to make at least a guy miss, try to pick up some extra yards, because that actually will end up becoming a large portion of your run game, is kind of the short passing game. Yeah. So more of an emphasis on pass catchers. Not that pass blocking won't still be important, but I think that more of a focus on being able to catch the ball and then make people miss in the flats will be important for the running backs.
Basically, the part with the running backs is you have to be as good of a receiver as you are as a runner. Like if you're
Yeah.
just a good runner and as a receiver, I don't think Mike McCarthy is going to be all that interested in you. In fact, we saw what he did in Green Bay at
Yeah.
the later parts where, you know what, we're going to draft a receiver and move him to running back because that's more important to us is that you know how to catch the ball and you're able to make plays out of the backfield. We can teach you how to run the ball when we need to, or if we are running the ball, everybody in the world is going to know we're just going to bring in a guy that can actually run the ball, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's going to be the biggest change. I want to talk a little bit more about the running back situation for the Cowboys and what maybe they do next year. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. This year, the only app that you need at your Super Bowl party is FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Lifetime because they are the #1 sportsbook in America. It's FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better because they have so many cool welcome bonus and features for new customers right now. Just download the FanDuel app so you can bet on Super Bowl 57 with a no sweat first bet. You'll get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. FanDuel lets you bet on everything from money lines to point spreads to who will score the first touchdown. The FanDuel Sportsbook app is safe, secure, and super easy to use. Best of all, you can get paid your winnings instantly. So join FanDuel today at FanDuel.com/lockdown to claim your no sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That is FanDuel.com/lockdown. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, Landon. Last question here. A couple people wanted to know, do you think the Cowboys will devalue the running back position now that Mike McCarthy is running his offense?
I think it just changes, right? Like it's more just the shape of the value is different, right? Like I think that you first of all, let me go ahead and preface all this that we still really don't have any idea what kind of offense this is going to be. We're all basing this on McCarthy's, 5 or
Yeah.
6-year-old offense. So I would say, generally speaking, that the running back position doesn't necessarily have less value, but the run game has less value, if that makes sense, right? Like, so I think the position still has value. It's just the shape of that value has changed, and maybe in some ways, those kind of running backs in the West Coast offense are more valuable
They are.
than Coryell offenses.
Right. Because there are a million running backs out there. If you need a guy that can just give you 14 carries for 67 yards, you can find that guy all over the place.
Mhm.
But can you find the guy that can be lined up in the slot and beat safeties in one-on-one coverage, but also can run against a 7-man block a box and pick up a linebacker, screaming down? Those guys are harder to find.
Which is why Marcus is endorsing Bijan as the pick at 26 because he can run routes.
But if you are going to draft a running back, there's a better fit for the Cowboys than Bijan at 26. But we'll talk about that another time.
Yeah, we can talk about it another time. But anyways, yeah, I do think, to answer your question, I actually think that running backs may be more valuable, but that's probably because they are more unique creatures that you have to find in order to kind of run in the West Coast offense, because finding a running back, like you said, who just carries the rock, that's not so difficult. Finding a running back who's equally adept at running the football and catching the ball out of the backfield, making people miss, that's a little bit harder to find. So I think that makes that archetype a little bit more valuable because it's a little more scarce.
Yes. And it doesn't mean it has to be Christian McCaffrey or Austin Eckler. Like, those guys are tough to find. And I don't think Dallas is going to want to pay up for what it takes to get those guys. What you're really looking for is like James White, who was in New England for a while, right? If you want a lesser example, like Theo Riddick, who was in Detroit forever with Matt Stafford, like that style of running back that he can give you 35 snaps in any single game because you're throwing the ball a bunch.
Yeah, totally. I think that those are the kind of guys you're looking at. Pollard is actually a great fit, I think, because he does of his skill set. So obviously you could bring him back and then maybe draft a guy, or it'll be interesting to see exactly how this all shapes out for the Cowboys. But I do think that the position is different between these two offenses.
The other thing I would say really quickly before we head out about the running back position in Mike McCarthy and just in West Coast offense is historically those teams use a lot of running backs, right? And we talked
Yeah.
about earlier this week, maybe the Cowboys switching from a two-headed monster, quote unquote, to more of a 3 or 4, backfield where you have 3 guys who can all do some different stuff, and you're just rotating these guys based on the matchups. And maybe you're not paying one guy 12 million, but maybe you're paying 3 guys 13 million. Like I could see that.
Or maybe you've got 3 running backs and a fullback. Wouldn't that be nice? Bring the fullback back into this offense. Do some interesting things with it. You're just not interested in this, but I'm very
I
interested
thought
in
we
it.
already had a fullback on this team. We're at number 21.
Well, hey, I'm on board with that too.
I'm kind of joking, but like,
I'm not joking in saying that if Ezekiel Elliott was willing and wanted to put on, like, let's say 10, 15 pounds, all
should
right,
be easy for him. Yeah.
he would be killer in the Kyle Juszczyk kind of role, right?
Yes.
Because the type of first of all, he's a great run blocker. Second of all, the type of person that would end up covering Zeke out of the backfield as a fullback would, certainly greatly increase his odds on making people miss after the
Not only
catch.
that, but like, I mean, that fullback has to be good in short yardage, like
Yeah.
be able to run the ball. I mean,
Yeah.
again, I'm kind of joking, but go look at what John Kuhn did for Green Bay all those years. Like, he got so many short yardage carries. If Dallas is dead set on bringing Zeke back and Zeke wants to be back, I don't know if you turn him into a full-time fullback. I think
No,
that's
superback is what you call him. You give him some kind of
right.
hybrid name to make it look sexy, and then basically play him as a
I mean,
H back.
listen, you were in Tampa Bay a little bit. This is kind
Yeah.
of what Tampa did with Mike Allstott, right?
Also, yeah, exactly. Listen, I think those kind of play. This has been an inefficiency in the NFL for a long time. There is a type of player that is a mismatch player that is somewhere between fullback and tight end. That if the NFL could figure out how to use, especially in a West Coast system with
Yeah.
the way things are, I mean, I think you see success in those types of players when you find the right kind of guy, and they're usually cheap because no one else wants
Yeah,
them.
nobody else is
I
using
just
them.
I think there's an inefficiency there that the Cowboys should exploit, especially now that they're using a West Coast offense.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of fullbacks that are available right now because only 2 teams use them, the Ravens and the 49ers, and that's it. Like, that's the only 2 teams that have fullbacks. So maybe the Cowboys will stumble on something here. That is it for today's show. Thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every day. Subscribe to the Locked On NFL podcast and get daily conversations on the biggest NFL stories, plus in-depth analysis on the biggest games with NFL key predictions every Friday. And on Monday, local insiders cover the weekend with game-to-game episodes. Locked On NFL available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Landon, you and I will be back tomorrow to talk about the tight ends, recapping them for the 2022 season. We should also tell the people that we are going to be starting some NFL draft coverage next week. So we're just going to tell you, we're watching cornerbacks. The names that we're watching: Joey Porter Jr. from Penn State, Cam Smith from South Carolina, Keely Ringo from Georgia. So if you want to watch along this weekend, compare your notes to ours next week. We highly recommend that you do that. We can't wait to start giving you guys some draft coverage. Go follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow.